Bucket of Bolts is a zine-length solo journaling RPG written by Jack Harrison and illustrated by Torben Bokenmeyer, with accompanying music by Christopher Michael Roberts. This game allows you to tell the tale of a starship, specifically a medium-sized freighter. It gives you some light guidance and prompts to write out the story of both the ship and its series of captains across years or even centuries or millennia. I've reviewed one other solo journaling zine RPG by Jack Harrison on this channel called Artifacts, and this game, Bucket of Bolts, is pretty much a reskin of that game. The internal structure of the game and the concept are all pretty much identical, but instead of telling the tale of a weapon or device, it's a spaceship. One of the most notable things about this game is that it essentially won Zine Quest in 2021. If you're not familiar, Zine Quest is a little event that the crowdfunding website Kickstarter holds every February, where participants are asked to create and promote a zine-length product, usually an RPG, in that month. It was a bit of a niche oddity the first year, but fast forward a couple years to 2021, and there were literally thousands of participants. Everyone wanted a piece of the Zine Quest pie, and since zines are inherently short on the page count, they're finite and relatively easy to create, at least compared to an open-ended RPG whose page count is not predetermined. Anyways, Jack Harrison had already been around the block with zine RPGs. His previous ones, Artifact and Orbital, both earned the highest praise from the indie RPG community, and rightfully so. As the saying goes down in Texas, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. When Jack announced Bucket of Bolts, it was instantly accepted and anticipated, and long story short, it raised more money than any other zine during the 2021 Zine Quest period. I refer to that as winning Zine Quest, but it's not really a competition. But I did find one thing very fascinating about Bucket of Bolts coming out at the top, and it was that there was so little artwork in it, at least in the digital version. There are just a few illustrations and that's it. The rest of the game itself, which is good, and we'll play through a quick example session together here in a minute, but the fact that an RPG could have so little artwork and just 18 pages of content and yet be so incredibly successful was quite an eye-opener for me. There's probably a lesson or conclusion in there somewhere, but I don't know what it is. Basically, Bucket of Bolts works like this. There are 3 acts to your story. Each act has its own set of captains and can span a variable length of time. The 3 acts, or eras, represent 3 major parts of the lifetime of your ship, and it's always the High Era, a time of strife, and the Descent. A ship starts off with a description as well as certain traits, and sometimes those traits change, but there is no mechanical bearing to any of it. It's a soft journaling game where you're pretty much in control of everything that happens, more or less. Rather than page through all 18 pages and explain the game to you, let's just run through the first act here. The first thing we'll need to do is determine what universe we're going to use. You don't have to use any existing canon, of course, but if you're a sci-fi lover like me, then your imagination has already at one point or another been captured by a space navy or fleet. Some franchises like Firefly have captivating ships, but not really a fleshed out world of different ships. Other franchises like Alien have a slowly expanding universe of ships, but none that are really exciting or evocative, at least not in my opinion. But even right here at this first step, it becomes apparent one of the reasons why Bucket of Bolts was so successful. So many of us have grown up imagining these starships, and our heads are full of them. They've been the home of so many fun and interesting and exciting stories we've seen in TV, movies, and books. So just for the sake of having some familiar canon to work with, let's choose a Star Wars ship. That would be fitting enough since the phrase Bucket of Bolts is from Star Wars in reference to the Falcon. I know the book says the game's built for medium-sized freighters, but let's pick a bulk freighter, like the one Solo and Chewie are flying at the beginning of episode 7. I think we can work with that. Add 3 traits. Okay, our ship is bulky, tough, and moody. It says describe your ship and draw it. I'm going to spare you my drawing skills, but let's say that this ship is light gray, ugly, boxy, and large, and about 1,200 feet long. Model name and simple factory designation. This is a Corellian Engineering Corporation Baleen class bulk freighter with the designation 1845B77. Okay, the first step of play is to choose our first captain for Act 1, the High Era. Let's choose the Intelligence Agent, a ruthless, loyal, undercover operator. This will take place in the heyday of the Galactic Empire, so our first captain here is an Imperial spy named Fedlo Payne. His cover is that of a young freight hauler who is on the run from the Empire. His agenda is to kidnap brilliant scientists from across the galaxy and deposit them at a secret research facility to develop a new war weapon, an autonomous AT-AT-like tank. The most explosive secret on board our ship is a prototype of the tank's AI, the brains of the weapon itself. Next step is to choose an event from the tables. Since Fedlo Payne is essentially a villain, let's go with the scum and villainy table. Let's go with the first entry here. Your captain and crew, returning from a planet-side excursion, found themselves ambushed in the docking bay. Alright, so the rubber has hit the road here. The action has begun. Let's say that we were ambushed by rebels, and our spy, Captain Fedlo, is horribly scarred in the face. The rebels managed to free all of the scientists that we had kidnapped over the past week, and we barely escape with our ship and our lives. Fortunately, they do not capture the experimental Walker AI core that we have stowed away. Step 4 of resolving a ship captain is to answer a ship question, which is optional. Let's go with your last captain installed a secret modification that she never got used to. Let's say that was a hidden pulse cannon, and it was in fact the only thing that saved us from the rebel ambush. Step 5, captain ends time with ship. Alright, so Fedlo Payne has to report to his commanding officer that he has failed miserably and he is put on a distant planet to live out the rest of his life. Step 6, move to time. Okay, this is where a passage of time, either immediate, minutes, hours, days, a week, or a month, takes place. Just like an artifact, the author asks you to rest a certain amount in real life, almost as a meditative practice. A soundtrack is also provided here for your listening enjoyment if you choose to wait. Okay, so I made a slight mistake on my original recording of this and skipped step 3, which is to choose from the timetables. There are 2 sets to choose from, shifts and currents or dust and rust. Let's go with shifts and currents here and choose the most obvious one that fits our story thus far. Your name is lost, forgotten, faded from stories, or intentionally scrubbed from galactic records. Cross it out. That's easy enough to reconcile. The Empire wanted to erase its failed secret project of trying to build an autonomous AT-AT. I mean, you saw what they did to Camino, right? Let's say the Empire relegated the ship to common hauling duty, completely forgetting about the highly secretive Walker tank AI in one of the cargo holds. The next captain is a true blue long-distance hauler named Tapo Aduba, a Rhodian. The book says long haulers are bullish, forthright, and protective. She has family on board, all hot-blooded Rhodian males who happen to be her cousins. They were forced to help her with the family business of long hauling, although they seek a life of adventure. They got the freight ship cheap from an Empire auction, and this is the last chance for the Aduba clan to make a living. What was the most valuable cargo that filled your hold? The most valuable thing that Tapo has ever hauled, besides the Empire's secret AI core, is a single case of blue wine from the planet Alderaan, which was of course blown up just a few years ago by the Death Star. Then we choose an event from the captain tables. Let's go with love and triumph this time. You pulled off an incredible heist, recovering a prized asset from the clutches of an entrenched warlord. So let's say our Rhodian anti-captain didn't want to have anything to do with it, but her young cousins twisted her arm into taking on a mission to reclaim a priceless Rhodian artifact, the sarcophagus of Dinley Dardrake, the greatest Rhodian poet who ever lived. The coffin was being displayed in the warlord's sanctuary on Riven 4, but through a daring, almost reckless operation, our captain sort of crash lands the freighter into the courtyard of the warlord's palace, and the cousins steal the sarcophagus back and they take off. Step 4 for this captain is to answer a ship question. Let's do your customized systems allow for a unique maneuver that many of your captains have attempted. Let's say it's opening the front cargo bay and dipping into the thermosphere of a planet in order to purge all living things inside the cargo hold with superheated atmospheric gas. Captain Aduba had to do this to eliminate the 24 syndicate gangers that had boarded her ship after she stole the coffin. People end up calling this maneuver a hot scoop. In step 5, Captain ends time with ship. Aduba and her cousins return to their home world of Rhodia as cultural heroes, and they quickly sell off the bulk freighter to pursue loftier goals. Then we go to time, and let's say it sits in a space hangar for a month before the next captain finds it. And that's the end of Act 1. Just like with Artifact, you can use this journaling game to create narrative assets for other games. In the case of our bulk freighter here, we have the beginnings of a juicy backstory if we were ever running a Star Wars game, or really any spacefaring sci-fi game. As the GM, you'd probably want to be artful about introducing the history of a ship to players. Dumping your bucket of bolts session onto them all at once might be kind of off-putting. But if you feed them details of the ship's history over time, that could be pretty intriguing. Alright, here are my thoughts on Bucket of Bolts. Cons. Flipping a lot. In terms of actually using the book, there's a fair bit of flipping back and forth. Since I was already acquainted with Jack's organization from Artifact, it wasn't too bad. And you do get used to it very quickly, but for beginners, there is a moment of confusion at the start when you're trying to sort out where to go from step to step. More art. The pages are beautifully laid out with plenty of space for the sections to breathe, but I find Torben Bockenmeyer's few illustrations so appealing, and I just wish I could have seen more of them in the book. Pros. Great concept. Reskinning Artifact to tell the tale of a starship was a stroke of genius. The formula works and it's a lot of fun. Like I mentioned, spaceships are part of our pop culture experience, at least for a lot of us, so it's easy and natural to tell the tale of a starship. Approachable. This game has a structure and a sort of roadmap for you to follow, but I'd hardly call any of it rules. And that's nice sometimes, to just pick up a solo journaling game that has no dice and no rules. It's purely focused on you telling a story. There's a lot of elegance and restraint packed into these 18 pages that I think seems a lot easier to create than it actually was. I don't know, maybe all this stuff comes easily to the creators, but I've learned over the years that, at least for me, making simple, readable, pretty, replayable games is way harder than filling page after page with every thought you've had about the rules and the world building that you want for your game. I don't know, some folks just make this sort of game look easy to make. That's all I've got. Thanks for watching. See ya.